Hi, my name is Dr. Kaye Cook, and I am chair of the Department of Psychology, Sociology, and Social Welfare. My own area of training is in developmental psychology, an area that I am fascinated by. For the last several years, I have done research on forgiveness. For the last several years before that, I said no to doing research on forgiveness, even though I was asked several times. Instead, I was working on pluralism in changing cultures. My interests have long been in cultural issues. For the earlier research, which was on pluralism, funded by a grant from the Templeton Foundation, I traveled in Brazil, Hong Kong, and mainland China, and I interviewed church and community leaders about the changing environment in their countries with modernity. You see, as a culture modernizes, new ideas are introduced, and beliefs which formerly seemed so clear and to define culture no longer seem so clear. We found that people continued to hold faith strongly, but that their beliefs were affected by changing cultures. Sometimes this pleased church leaders, other times it did not. These ideas are explored in a book I wrote with Dr. Peter Berger, sociologist, called Faith in a Pluralist Age. Religion is fundamental to a country's resilience. If I hadn't known it earlier, as a result of these interviews, I came to see the strength of faith in cultures across the globe. While researching the book, I had been asked by a friend to participate in a massive study at multiple Christian colleges about forgiveness. Yet I hesitated. Yes, forgiveness is a strongly religious value. Yes, it is foundational to our lives, but it seemed to me to have few culturally distinctive elements, and my area is the study of culture. According to the literature, forgiveness is similar, maybe virtually identical across cultures. Indeed, if I ask anyone from Brazil or China or Indonesia or anywhere, everybody knows what forgiveness is. My interests are cultural. Forgiveness did not fit. But God thought it did. By a series of incidents a year ago, I found myself in Indonesia doing research with Christian colleagues on forgiveness. With their translation, we together interviewed 40 individuals, some Christian, some atheist, some Hindi. Yes, forgiveness isn't universal. We agree on what it is. It occurs in situations in which one violates one's own values, that's self-forgiveness, or in which one is the victim of another's actions, that's other forgiveness. It plays out in similar terms in a culture. The person makes a decision that this is a violation or not. As a result, the person feels emotions such as anger or hurt and may even demand restitution. If an individual forgives another, and this is the definition, they experience internal change in how they feel toward another. And if reconciliation takes place, external changes too. Yet, forgiveness is not universal, as I found out. As a collectivist culture, Indonesia has social mores that are unlike those in the U.S. For example, when many Americans seek God's guidance, we tend to go away and pray. We may or may not then inform others what God has said. Indonesians, on the other hand, experience forgiveness as a deeply embedded member of an extremely social culture. Indonesians are socially embedded. They perceive interpersonal transgressions as embedded in a broader social milieu at dyadic and family and culture and communal levels. This social embeddedness is accompanied by a desire for social harmony. Imagine yourself at a family gathering. You have a fight with your sister. You want to damp it down because you want there to be social harmony. Social harmony is the desire to resolve interpersonal transgressions in order to preserve social peace and stability. And since you're socially embedded, in a larger context than just that of the two people involved. Indonesians may choose not to identify a violation as needing forgiveness, because if they do, they must engage their larger family in resolving the violation. They may need to inform their grandfather. They may need to participate in large family gatherings if the violation is severe enough. Social embeddedness and social harmony are matched by higher expectations for social responsibility. People from collectivist cultures prioritize a person acknowledging their transgression, making amends to the victim and their family and to their community for these transgressions. Currently, I'm engaged in 3 projects in Indonesia. The first is online. It is designed to assess whether I can develop a scale that measures differences among Americans and Indonesians, Christians and Muslims, in their attitudes to the 3 sociocultural characteristics I just talked about: social harmony, social embeddedness, social responsibility. I have a scale that I would like to test. I would like to do it in personal interviews, but I cannot because of COVID. So we will be posting it online. Second, I will be a Fulbright Scholar in Indonesia next fall, researching whether scales such as the one I have designed, and there's a lot of them that were earlier available, to ask whether they're equally valid in different cultures. By validity, I mean, can Americans take the scale and the results make sense? I think they will for Indonesians. I don't know for Americans. Yet Americans too experience some degree of concerns about social harmony, embeddedness in social culture, and concern about whether other people take responsibility for their role in relationships. At this point, virtually every scale within the forgiveness literature was validated in Western culture, developed by Westerners with Westerners. So forgiveness is universal, right? That shouldn't matter. Well, sort of. I hope, at least by now, I have convinced you that this might not be so totally true. The third project, finally, my colleagues and I are waiting to hear if we've gotten funding for a research project that we hope to conduct with 4 to 8-year-olds, not adults, kids in Christian and Muslim preschools. The research will consist of interviews with Muslims and Christians. I hope I can carry it out, depending on what happens with COVID. The interviews are about kids developing beliefs in God. So those are the 3 projects: the developing my own scale, Fulbright in Indonesia next fall, and the developing belief study with kids. So is forgiveness a religious value? You know it is. We are called to forgive, as are Muslims, by the way. Differently, but in many ways the same. Is forgiveness universal? It is in some sense. We are called to live in community, and living in community means that we hurt one another and that we must forgive for the sake of harmony in the community. Also, because God calls us to. But I hope when you consider whether forgiveness is universal, you now hesitate. Yes, forgiveness is universally understood to be important, but it's also contextualized. We express our love for one another in ways that are shaped by our culture as well as our faith. And people in the culture hear our love for them in a way that is contextualized. And we need to know more about that. Being shaped by culture is not unbiblical. God calls us to be strangers in a strange land, yes, but also to love one another as God has loved us. God loves us with a universal love, but it's in a way that humans can understand. Forgiveness is like this. When we forgive in a way that reflects God, so that others will understand and feel that love. And it might be different for a child and an adult. It might be different for an Indonesian than an American. So I have come full circle. Pluralism in culture challenges faith and forgiveness. Faith becomes more complex. Forgiveness becomes more challenging. How do I receive forgiveness from a Hindi I have offended if they expect my family to meet with their family and make amends? My family would be shocked. There are no easy answers. In the next phase of my adult life, once these 3 projects are completed, I hope to focus on these contextualized, more complex issues. Living the Christian life is challenging, and it's made more complex by the world in which we live. We cannot avoid the need to forgive. I hope that you will become more aware of and tuned into the need for forgiveness as a central component of what it means to serve God. Thanks.